I'd like to paraphrase something that I've heard the great writer Salman Rushdie say on a couple of occasions, and that is that institutions of higher learning should be safe places for ideas, not safe from ideas, that we should expect and even want to be introduced to ideas that make us feel, well, uncomfortable and even cause us to challenge our beliefs and ideals. Sadly, I'm afraid, in many university programs, thinking tends to be quite regimented and course content largely goes unchallenged. In that regard, I'm reminded of a joke that I've heard at a couple of different university graduation ceremonies. And it goes something like this. Some old guy will stand up in front of a sea of young faces and declare, "Half of what we've taught you is wrong, and we don't know which half." And it always gets a laugh because, ironically, it's always true. In fact, I can recall, and I'd like to tell you, a couple of examples from my own undergraduate education. I can recall that when I entered university and molecular biology was just in its infancy, we had something called the central dogma of molecular biology, credited to none other than Francis Crick, the fellow who discovered the double helix structure of DNA. In any event, the central dogma of molecular biology said that genetic information always flowed in one direction, from DNA to RNA, and from RNA to protein, never in reverse. Now, something called the central dogma has to pretty much be set in concrete, and so it's something which I memorized and believed. But even as I was memorizing the central dogma of molecular biology, the first exceptions were being discovered. I think it was in the early 1970s that someone discovered the retroviruses, which, as you know, insert their RNA into cells, and from that RNA the cells create DNA, going in reverse and violating the central dogma. Of course, one of the most famous examples of a retrovirus is the human immunodeficiency virus, the virus which gives us HIV/AIDS. And so it turns out that the central dogma of molecular biology is, in fact, well, a big mistake. Another example from my undergraduate years is Dale's Law, which ironically was not created by Dale, but is often credited to him. And Dale's Law stated that every neuron produces one and only one neurotransmitter, and therefore releases the same neurotransmitter at all of its synapses. And again, just as I was memorizing and believing Dale's Law, the first exceptions were being discovered. I think it was in 1972 that Jeffrey Bernstock published a paper demonstrating that a class of autonomic neuron released ATP as a neurotransmitter. And that was a tough sell, ATP as a neurotransmitter. But it wasn't long before other exceptions began to appear, until finally there were so many exceptions that it turned out Dale's Law wasn't wrong some of the time, it was wrong all of the time. I guess the lesson is that we're never as smart in retrospect as we thought we were in the moment, that stuff that we think is absolutely right, even stuff that's based on really good solid science, sometimes turns out to be mistaken. And so we must always keep an open mind. Even the most fundamental principles of our discipline or our profession will turn out to be imperfect over time. And so we must always strive to build upon and improve the ideas which we have inherited. Thank you very much.